I had just poured my coffee when I saw the silver car roll to a stop near the lake's edge. It was Isla's. I hadn't seen her since the memorial 6 months of silence. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this town, not near this house, and definitely not near that lake. She stepped out in a hurry, looking around like someone who didn't want to be seen. Then she opened the trunk and yanked out a heavy duffel bag. I squinted. She struggled under its weight, dragging it through the brittle grass. Her foot caught a root, and she stumbled forward, almost dropping it. She steadied herself, took one last look over her shoulder, and flung it into the water. At first I just stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The splash echoed like a slap. Then I heard it. A sound I couldn't explain. High-pitched, sharp, muffled, but real. It came from the water. I dropped the mug. It shattered across the porch. I ran. The slope was slick with wet leaves, and I slipped halfway down, scraping my hand on a rock, but I didn't stop. The bag hadn't sunk yet. It bobbed near the reeds, barely floating. I waded in boots, filling with icy water, my lungs burning. The zipper was soaked. My fingers shook. I ripped it open. A baby, soaked in fleece, blue lips, limbs stiff, eyes barely open. I gasped, scooping him into my arms, cradling his tiny body against my chest. He was cold, too cold, but breathing, barely. I ran back up the slope with him pressed to me like something sacred, dialing 911 with the other hand. My voice cracked. My heart wouldn't slow. By the time the sirens came, Isla was gone. Not a tire mark left, not a trace. Just me, the baby, and the water. They asked me who he was. I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The ER doors slammed open and a nurse pulled the baby from my arms before I had the chance to even whisper goodbye. I stood there, dripping, half-soaked, shaking from more than the cold. Someone pushed a blanket over my shoulders. Someone else asked for my name. My voice barely worked. They kept saying the infant, the male child time of exposure, but I couldn't stop staring at the doors he disappeared through. Is he mine? I finally asked someone. A nurse, maybe? I don't remember her face. She paused. He's a boy? About 5 weeks. Good weight. Mild hypothermia, but he's stable. 5 weeks. That would mean Gavin would have known. But Gavin never told me Isla was pregnant. Not even a hint. Not in his last messages. Not when I begged him to visit more often. Not after she stopped answering my calls. I sat in the family waiting room with a cup of hospital coffee that went cold in my hands. The walls were too white, too clean for what I'd just seen. I still had mud on my jeans, blood under my nails. The sound of that cry still cutting through my head like a warning bell I couldn't shut off. A uniformed officer came to find me. "We've identified the car you described," he said. "It's registered to Isla Calloway Ashford." I nodded. Of course it was. "She claims she was never near the lake," he continued. "Says she spent the morning shopping. Groceries. Pharmacy." "That's a lie," I said. He didn't answer. Later he came back with footage. A time-stamped video of Isla 2 towns over. Shopping cart full of diapers. Talking to a cashier, smiling. "She's on camera," he said quietly. A little after 11. My mouth opened then closed again. I'd seen her. I know I did. I know the shape of her shoulders. The way she walks when she's nervous. I know that coat. Still, the footage played again. And suddenly, I wasn't sure what I knew at all. I was in the hallway outside the neonatal unit when the social worker found me. A clipboard in her hand. A look that said she'd done this too many times. "We found something," she said. "It was in the bag with the child. A registration form from a private clinic." She handed it to me. The handwriting wasn't Isla's. It was clean, block-printed, filled in by someone who knew how to be careful. Rowan Gavin Ashford. My eyes stopped on the middle name. Gavin. And then the last. Ashford. It hit like a stone to the chest. There was no way someone outside the family would have chosen that. Gavin never used his middle name in public. Only family did. I looked up. He's mine, I said. He has to be. She didn't say yes or no, just nodded, and told me they'd already submitted for a DNA match. Shouldn't take long, she said. The court will want confirmation before custody decisions are discussed. Custody. The word felt strange in my mouth, like something borrowed. Meanwhile, the police kept circling the same questions. Isla still claimed she'd never been near the lake, that someone else, an old friend, must have taken the baby. She said she had been planning to place him for adoption and that the friend must have panicked. But Isla didn't have old friends. Gavin used to say that. She doesn't keep people, just versions of herself. I never understood what he meant until I started remembering. 2 weeks before the accident, Gavin had asked me for the name of that baby furniture store in Tilton. I hadn't thought much of it, but now I remembered the receipt I'd found when I cleaned out his things. Pale green paper typed dated exactly 13 days before the crash. Bassinet, Ocean Birch, $489.99, paid in full. I didn't throw it away. I kept it tucked in the side of his wallet, along with the key fob from his first car. That night I dug it out of the drawer where I kept it, and I waited for the call that would either confirm everything or undo me completely. They called me back to the hospital 2 days later. The nurse's tone on the phone was soft, almost cautious, like she already knew what I was about to hear. The results came in, she said. You might want to sit down before we start. I didn't sit. I just folded my hands on the edge of the table, palms damp, heart unsteady. The baby Rowan is biologically related to you, she said. A direct maternal link. You're his grandmother. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room tilted slightly as if the air itself had shifted shape. My grandson. Gavin's son. Proof that I hadn't lost everything after all, and that someone had wanted to bury what was left. They let me see him again through the glass. Tiny, wrapped in soft fabric tubes around his wrist chest, rising in steady rhythm. His hair was dark like Gavin's when he was born. My throat closed up. When I left the ward, 2 detectives were waiting. They told me Isla had been questioned again. She'd denied everything, claimed the baby wasn't hers, that she'd been helping a friend who couldn't raise a child. But her name was printed right there on the birth certificate. Her signature. Her handwriting. The officers exchanged a look that told me they didn't believe her either, but they called it a possible postpartum episode. I knew better. Isla wasn't broken. She was strategic. She'd planned this. The next morning, a letter arrived, hand-delivered by a courier. Legal stationery. Petition for custody. Isla Calloway Ashford. Her statement was short, clinical. The current custodian, Marlon Ashford, age 62, exhibits signs of emotional distress and instability following the recent death of her son. My hands shook as I read it. The audacity, the cruelty of it, turning my grief into ammunition. I called a lawyer that afternoon. A man Gavin once worked with. He listened quietly, then said, "You'll need every document you have. Birth records, the letter, the receipt, everything." By nightfall, I had it all spread across the kitchen table. And in the middle of the pile, one word circled in ink proof. The storage unit smelled like dust and cold wood. I hadn't had the strength to go through Gavin's things after the funeral. But now, with the hearing approaching and Isla circling like a hawk, I couldn't afford to leave anything untouched. Most of it was ordinary. Bins of old books, a guitar he hadn't played in years, winter coats, and an unopened crockpot still in its box from a wedding gift registry. I nearly missed it, a plain gray folder tucked behind a stack of shoeboxes labeled Plan B in Gavin's handwriting. I sat down on the concrete floor and opened it. Inside were neatly organized documents. The first was an updated life insurance policy dated 6 months prior. I scanned the lines and saw it beneficiary child of Gavin Ashford, to be established via birth record or DNA match. No mention of Isla. Next was a copy of a revised will. Short, specific. Gavin left everything, his savings, retirement, even the equity in his condo, to my future child. Again, Isla was not listed, not even as a secondary. Then I found the letter. It wasn't sealed, just folded, creased down the middle like he'd handled it more than once. Mom, if anything happens to me, please protect our son. I don't know if I'm being paranoid or just tired of hoping Isla will change. But she started saying strange things, about not being ready, about needing a reset. I don't know what she means, but it doesn't feel right. If I'm wrong, I'll burn this. But if I'm not, I need to know you'll take care of him. His name is Rowan. Love, Gavin. October 12th, 4 days before the crash. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it back the way I found it and placed it at the top of the folder. I didn't cry. I didn't have time to. Not now. Instead, I stood up, carried it to the car, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. It came in just after midnight. Unknown number. I almost didn't listen. I almost deleted it, thinking it was another debt scam or political recording. But something in my chest told me to press play. The recording crackled. Then Isla's voice came through, sharp, unsteady slurring on the edges, like she'd been drinking or hadn't slept in days. You think you're winning? You think the courts are going to hand him over to you like some pity prize? There was a pause, a breath, then the real weight dropped. That baby ruined everything, everything. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to be some stay-at-home sob story with spit up on my blouse. I had plans. You don't get to erase that with one pathetic rescue act. My hand clenched around the phone. I let it play to the end. 37 seconds that said more than all her filed statements combined. The next morning, I brought it to my lawyer. He played it twice, then again with the custody investigator in the room. Neither said anything at first. Then the investigator looked up and said quietly, "This changes things." We updated the file, attached the transcript, marked it with the date, time, and call log record. Isla's voice, her number, her words clear as glass. But clarity doesn't always come with protection. She still has parental rights, the lawyer reminded me. If she wants to vanish, there's very little stopping her right now. The words sat heavy. The idea of Isla slipping away with Rowan, fleeing the state, changing names, burning everything behind her, made my stomach turn. The only thing that stood between her and that escape was time. Time I no longer had the luxury of wasting. I started sleeping with my phone on my chest, volume high, just in case the court called, just in case someone saw her, just in case she came back. Rowan stayed at the hospital for monitoring another 3 days. On the 4th, they handed me his discharge papers. And for the first time, I took him home. The courtroom smelled like dust and cold coffee. Nothing about it felt sacred, but everything in it mattered. Isla sat across from me, polished and still in a charcoal dress that didn't suit her. She didn't look at me once. Her lawyer went first. "She's grieving," he said, motioning toward me. "She lost her only son and has projected that loss onto a child she wasn't prepared to raise. This isn't about guardianship, it's about control. She's clinging to something she doesn't understand." He called me emotional, fragile. He used words like unfit and overwhelmed. I kept my hands folded in my lap. When they asked me to speak, I didn't stand right away. I pulled the letter from my bag first, unfolded it carefully, and looked down at Gavin's handwriting one more time before reading aloud. I don't know if I'm being paranoid or just tired of hoping Isla will change, but she started saying strange things, about not being ready, about needing a reset. If I'm wrong, I'll burn this. But if I'm not, I need to know you'll take care of him. I looked up, met the judge's eyes. Then I told them about the life insurance, the revised will, the receipt for the bassinet, the birth certificate with Isla's signature, and finally, the voicemail. She said he ruined everything I said, that she didn't want to be someone with a baby. Her words, not mine. The courtroom went quiet. Real quiet. Isla's lawyer leaned over and whispered something. She turned. Her face shifted panic under the gloss. And then she stood up and walked straight out the side door. The judge didn't call a recess. He simply nodded and asked for the voicemail to be admitted as evidence. My lawyer sat back in his chair without a word. On the table between us lay Gavin's letter, unfolded, now seen. Outside, rain started to fall soft but steady. And before the judge could speak again, a bailiff stepped into the room with a phone in hand and said, "We have a situation." They found her 2 days later holed up in a roadside motel near another body of water, smaller than Lorraine Mercier, but still a place where things could disappear. She had a prepaid passport, a fake ID under the name Lena Cross, and a bag packed for someone who didn't intend to come back. She said nothing when they cuffed her. No protest, no plea. Just that same hollowed-out expression she wore at the memorial. The charges came quickly: attempted abandonment, fraud, obstruction. The judge issued an emergency order granting me temporary custody. It didn't feel like winning. That night, I sat on the edge of the couch with Rowan cradled in my arms, a bottle pressed gently to his lips. He drank slowly, eyelids fluttering one hand, gripping the edge of my sweater like it was the only thing holding him in place. My hands shook the whole time, not from fear, but from everything else, from the weight of what it meant to be chosen, only when there was no one else left, from the knowledge that Gavin had seen it coming, but never told me, from the realization that even now Isla hadn't shed a tear. Not for Gavin, not for Rowan, not for what almost happened in the cold gray water behind my house. Rowan finished his bottle and made a soft noise against my chest. I held him until his body settled and his breath went long and even. Then I tucked him into the crib I'd bought that morning, a second-hand piece from a family up the road who'd offered it with warm eyes and no questions. The nursery still smelled faintly of cardboard and paint. Nothing was finished yet. The rug didn't lie flat. The nightlight flickered. But he slept. And I sat there in the half-dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd tell him one day. About his father. About her. About the lake. About the bag. And how everything that was supposed to be lost was still here. I cleared out Gavin's old office the following week. I kept the desk moved, the bookshelf rolled up the rug he used to pace across during phone calls. The window still caught the same soft morning light he liked. I remember him standing there once, hands on his hips, telling me he was going to make everything work. He really believed it. I painted the walls pale gray, neutral, quiet. Rowan didn't cry much, but when he did, it came like a storm. Sudden, sharp, hard to calm. Loud noises startled him. Sudden movement made him flinch. The pediatrician said it was normal. I nodded like I believed that. He wouldn't fall asleep unless I sat with him, and even then, only after a few rounds of humming and pacing. But eventually, he'd take my finger in his hand and not let go until his breathing evened out. He didn't smile much, but sometimes he made this low little hum when I sang. That was enough. The social worker came on a Tuesday. She walked through the house with a quiet clipboard and careful shoes. She took notes. She peeked into cupboards. She asked about safety latches and routines. When she sat down at the table, her tone shifted. Warmer. "You've done well," she said. "He's bonded with you. It shows." I waited for her to leave before I cried, just for a minute, just to release whatever part of me had been holding its breath since I pulled him from the water. That night, I opened the last drawer of Gavin's desk. It stuck a little from years of disuse. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a baby book. The kind with prompts and pockets and spaces for firsts. It was completely blank. I held it for a long time. Then I took out a pen, sat beside the crib, and filled in the first page with his name. Rowan Gavin Ashford. Born April 15th. Weight 7 pounds 4 ounces. Found May 31st. Brought home June 14th. I left the rest empty for now. There was time. Rowan is 5 now. Every morning just after breakfast, we walk the same path down to the lake. He likes to throw small pebbles into the shallows and watch the ripples fan out. I let him go ahead of me just far enough that I can still hear him humming to himself. He always hums when he's calm. Gavin used to, too. He doesn't remember what happened here. Not the bag. Not the water. Not the ambulance or the questions or the courtroom. That part of the story belongs to me alone, and I keep it where it can't touch him. He asks about his father sometimes. I tell him the truth I can give, that Gavin loved him, that he was kind, that he once built a crib with his own hands and picked out a name long before anyone else knew they'd need it. I don't tell him about Isla. Not yet. Not the motel, not the passport, not the silence she left behind. Maybe one day when he's old enough to ask the kind of questions that deserve answers. But not now. Now I tell him what matters most, that he was wanted, that he was chosen, that the day I found him, the world tilted back into place, that no matter what anyone said or didn't say or tried to undo, he belonged. We sit sometimes on the bench by the water's edge, the same one Gavin helped me repaint when he was 16. Rowan leans against my side, warm and wiggly, his hand slipping into mine without thinking. I watch the water and think of the day I pulled him from it, not as a rescue, as a beginning. He tugs at my sleeve, asking if we can go home for snacks. I nod. Brush the sand from my knees. He runs ahead, laughing, and I follow quietly down the path that brought us here.